Greetings, all. Shardvixen here. Alright, so today is Know Thyself, and its author, is S.E.Hinton. She wrote The Outsiders. So, The Outsiders, which my brain won't think, was written in 1967. I was 4 years old. Well, actually, I was 3 years old. 2 years old. 2 years old, sorry. 1968, I was 3 years old. But I loved reading the books. Now, I can guarantee you that when I started reading The Outsiders, I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. Maybe younger than that. If it was in the youth section, so I'm sure that I started reading it as soon as I could. It's one of my favorite stories, of course, from my childhood. I read it all the way up until I was probably a young adult. Maybe revisited it 1 or 2 times. And then, of course, the movie, because the movie is full of all the teen idols from the 1980s. I mean, we had Patrick Swayze in it. We had River Phoenix was in it. We had Emilio Estevez. His brother there was also in it. Rob Lowe was in it. I was trying to think who Steve was. 2-Bit. I can't remember who 2-Bit was. I think 2-Bit was on either Emilio Estevez or and then I can't remember Soda Pop either. I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. But I also say a lot. I have the quote from her book is "Stay Gold." I really like that. I've used it most of my life. For me, it meant, stay that part of the goodness of you. The part that's you, the good part of you. Stay that way as much as possible. I don't know why I'm tapping my chest either. Anyway, so, but I'm thinking about it as a 50-year-old, thinking about those books, and, they're really short books. They're not a huge read. They're pretty easy to read through. And the time era that they were taken from, of course, was in the 60s and early 70s. And she was in high school at the time. And she's still alive now. She's like 70, in her 70s. So she's like my mom's age. And the interesting thing about that, well, she's a little younger than my mom. I think she's like 72 or something like that. My mom's older than that. Is that, we think about gangs, and I never quite thought that it was Oklahoma, like they were talking about gangs in Oklahoma. And so it's interesting that in the 60s, Oklahoma, which in California you always thought of Oklahoma like the cowboy town, like Texas, because of the movies that you saw and the things that they talk about. Like I never saw it as a well-formed city like Sacramento or San Francisco or LA. But it was. I mean, it was, a lot of the cities were as big or bigger than some of those other cities I talked about, and they had a lot of crime and a lot of stuff like that. The interesting thing about The Outsiders is it was written about 2 gangs that she experienced in school. I didn't experience gangs in school. I experienced people, like set people, groups in school. But I could understand the reference there. That's not to say I didn't meet people that were... I didn't meet people who were in gangs. Like, I knew people that lived in Sacramento that were parts of gangs. But the gangs became different. My mom... She won't vouch for this, but my aunts told me my mom was part of a girls' gang in the 50s, so in Sacramento. But I didn't read it for the gang part of it. I read it because I found it interesting that you had a female writer who wasn't allowed to say she was a female writer. The reason that she used SE was because the writers told her that it would be better if people thought that it was a male writing the story. I find that always interesting to me. I read the book because I like the interaction of the idea of people without adults. But I found now, when I started writing adult children's books, children's stories. Okay, so we're going to do this weird little tangent for a minute, but it is about knowing self. So I have written a couple of novels. I have not published said novels, but one of them was written for a contest, and the contest was write a youth story. And youth stories are where they classify them as youth stories if, one, the characters, hero, villain, whatever, are children, or under 18, are youth, I guess. If there are no adults present, and they're talking about youth stuff. So in The Outsiders, there are no adults present, even though technically the oldest brother there would be considered an adult. He is still also young, because like 20. So everybody is under the age of 21 per se. So there aren't any adults except teachers or authoritative figures. Now, if you haven't seen the movies, if you haven't read the books, her books, I would suggest see the movies, because she helped okay the scripts for that. So Outsiders, that was then, this is now, Rumblefish, Tex are the ones that were made in the movies. She has one other one called The Taming of Star Runner that I have read once. I didn't like it. I'm not a big horse fan, so I never got into fictional stories that had to do with horses, like the connection between human and horses, because I believe horses would eat us if they could. They just don't have the teeth for it. One of my other favorite writers, Anne McCaffrey, writes about a planet where they have carnivorous horses, or horse-like creatures. So, all right, so The Outsiders. I read The Outsiders. My favorite book of hers is That Was Then, This Is Now. But it's a really sad book. I think the reason I like it is because the people in it are probably closer in what was going on in their lives to what was going on in my life when I was their age. So I like that one. And also, I always remember the end part of that book, in which, if you haven't read it, I guess you'll find out now. But like I said, you watch the movie. In where Emil Estevez was in that one, I think. I don't remember who the other person is. But where he says, we were once brothers, and he says, that was then and this is now, when he's sitting in prison. I always felt that the writer made the characters very simple. Like, Mark was all about himself. But so was Brian in That Was Then, This Is Now. And I found it interesting that she wrote about males more. Her females are kind of shallow. They don't have a lot of personality per se. They're secondary characters, of course, but they don't stand out as, for me. I mean, you might read it and get a whole different, or had read it and had a whole different thing. But I just found it interesting. She had these females, and she didn't really write about them. She wrote about the males, and they were always very black and white, good, evil. Even though there was mixtures of stuff in there, like because they were part of a gang, or came from a part of the lifestyle that wasn't exclusively good, which is probably why I read the books, because my lifestyle as a child wasn't exactly good. I had a father who was alcoholic, a mother that enabled him, a mother that was a little weird in herself at periods of time. I mean, she was a very smart woman, don't get me wrong. I don't know why I say that. I'm not going to justify things, what I say, but I do it sometimes. My childhood was very weird. It was a speckly thing of both really extreme lows and really extreme highs, and then you blend that in with my mental health issues and then my brother's mental health issues, and the whole family is like a big ball of weirdness. And then trying to negotiate that, trying to move through my life at the time. I use books, as I've said before, in comic books and music and things like that, to define who I was, to figure out where I stood in the world, how to make sense of it all. Like, you know, you'd watch TV shows and like the Brady Bunch, and everybody's happy. And the whole family is, you know, together. And even when they have problems, they're not really big problems. Uh, that's why I like the Addams Family, because they weren't traditional. Anyhow, so, like I said, I got to about 20 and I stopped reading those books because I didn't have that lifestyle anymore. It was like reading a history part of something, you know. And that was then this was now the drug use had a big ring to it, you know. I did LSD, so I understood what was happening with Eminem. I found it interesting that some of the things that she talks about is like that sticks in my mind was that Eminem's hair was so long, and he was a hippie, and she didn't paint hippies like in a good light either. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, these people were heroes. They weren't heroes. None of these people. It was like just a snapshot in a person's life and the things that they were thinking about. And it made me think about things. But mostly it was trying to find like how I fit into the world at that time, really. Rumblefish was to me, not as well written as I think The Outsiders are probably the best written book that she wrote. I feel like she tried to get more literal in her literary style, and it got more artsy for me. And I'm not very into artsy reads. Sometimes I'll read poetry books, and sometimes I'll read books that people will say, oh, this is just the book to read. But if I can't connect with the characters, I don't really like the books. So I think in the story, I connected with Mark. Even though Mark, and that was then, this is now, becomes a drug dealer, that's how he's making money. His concept of what was right and wrong was that he was trying to take care of his family, and he used drugs to do it. That's how he made the money, was to do it. And he didn't have a conscious effort in thinking beyond that little square. Whereas Brian, it was always about trying to figure out where he was at. But he was such a wishy-washy kind of guy, I guess, is my problem. Now, I don't know if it was that way when I was younger. I mean, I think I would have saw Mark as a person that needed help, and Brian as a person that didn't help him in the right way. Like, he told him they were brothers, and then when it came down to it, he didn't really help him like a brother would. He tried to do it differently, I think. I don't know. Because I have a brother that's like that. My brother was problematic. And I tried to help him, and it didn't go over well. And then I got disowned from my father and my brother. So maybe I'm more like Brian in that aspect. Yeah. In The Outsiders, of course, it's Johnny that I like. I like Daryl, and I like Ponyboy. I really like Soda Pop. He sounded like a really cool character. And I think the movie, of all the movies, that one did the best. Rumblefish movie was pretty good. It was done by Francis Coppola, though, so, and the same as The Outsiders. That was in This Is Now. The movie's like, if you were in again to the 1980s. teen idols, then it was an okay movie. I wish, after I read the books, I kind of wish that she had written more books and kind of pulled in and told you the end result. I mean, we know that Mark dies. He dies because he goes on a rampage, and in text they explain it, and he dies. And I'm not sure why she felt the urge to put him in it, because she doesn't give him a name till the end of the book. I'm not really sure why that was written that way. I'm not a big why did the author do these kind of things? I'm more of a logical reader. I figure that there's a way that the story should go. Even most outrageous, just out there surreal stuff, there still is kind of a logic of stuff where you could say, oh yeah, I saw it, I see where that went, oh yeah, I could understand that. In Rumblefish, the older boy, motorcycle boy, I think is suffering from depression, severe depression, and he sees the fish and wants to know if they can be free. And I think that's an inner thing for him. Even when I was a teen, I think that was the feeling I got, because I remember feeling that way about animals as well, as that would they exist the same if you let them go, and maybe you should let them all go, and that's why I was part of Greenpeace and PETA, because I wanted to let all the animals go and see what happened. I'm not part of, I like Greenpeace still. I'm not really into PETA or ALF because they're almost to the point of being like terrorist groups, I think. And I don't think violence is how you solve your problems. I read texts, I saw the movies. It didn't have an everlasting effect on me. The same thing at Taming the Star Runner. I read the book. It didn't have a really everlasting. So it was mostly The Outsiders. That was then, and this is now. And Rumblefish. And of the three, The Outsiders is the one I'm the most familiar with. If you haven't read them, I would suggest reading the books. If you're not a book reader, I mean, they're not very thick. If you're not a book reader, then I would watch the movie. The movie is spectacular. Not spectacular, but the movie's, spectacular. It's good. Good movie, The Outsiders. It's a fun movie with the interaction, and it follows the book pretty well, like I said. The whole part of Johnny and Ponyville not trusting, their family members, and in the same point wanting to protect their family members, is a good classic hero story. So I would suggest I would read Outsiders. I wouldn't worry about the other two, or watch the movies. So, all right. And it's really hard to connect with that because I haven't read the books in a long time and I haven't watched them, but they had a big impact in my life, to the point that when I was working with young boys, and when I was working with young kids and we had to come up with things to read, that was the book I always suggested to them, because I thought it was probably the easiest one to kind of connect to. I have other books that I preferred, but every once in a while, every couple of years, like I said, from when I first started reading The Outsiders, I'd go back and revisit the book, or watch the movie, and so they have a part in my life. They don't have a part now. I have not read them to my son. I did not read them. I think I offered them to my daughter, but I didn't read them to my son, and I haven't read them to my grandson, and I don't think I will, because they don't have the same. I don't feel they have the same connection for them. And actually, most schools, quite a few schools, will use. Sorry, got the itchies. Use The Outsiders as a book to read. That and Kill a Mockingbird. Those are the two that I've seen. That and the other one that I remember reading a lot, Lord of the Flies. I should talk about that one. I don't know if I could do 20 minutes. Maybe I'll push in another one with it. Anyway, so that's it. Catch you all on the flip side. I am out of here. Peace. I don't know what that was about, but hey. Have a good weekend, all.